Like, we are built to survive and to thrive, but it's a matter of how long are you willing to sit? Are you down to sit for 5 minutes in complete silence and have your thoughts and work through that?
Don't you know that the music should be solemn?
This is Theo Rossi. This is Theory. I got you stuck off the realness. We be the infamous. Hey, hey. What's up, everybody? Coming up, I got JR Martinez on Theory. If you're not familiar with JR's story, get comfortable. He is a survivor, a thriver, a surpriser. He has a new podcast coming up called Rebirth. I am honored to have him in my life. And I think you will be too after this. Let's go break it down with JR. My brother, we were just talking and see if anybody needed to run to the bathroom before it. And, this is one of my problems. I drink so much water that I get nervous doing podcasts because I feel like I have to run to the bathroom every 5 minutes.
You got to be strategic, man. There's a strategy to this. You got to stop drinking at least. It's like having a puppy. You got to stop like 2 hours before. You got to do something.
I have 3 glasses of water. I have one with apple cider vinegar next to me. I have one with lemon, and then I have one with chlorophyll in it, all within arm's reach. This is not good.
Oh my God. You got clear urine, I bet.
So that is my mission with these podcasts. I literally sit here. So we were talking a bunch before this, and we were talking about, you got your new podcast coming out called Rebirth.
Yes,
which
sir.
I absolutely am so excited for. I love what you did with the little graphic with the JR inside the Rebirth, which is amazing. And you know, we'll get into the history of you and I, but Rebirth, with that name, Rebirth symbolizes a lot of things, right? It symbolizes that that at one point there was a death and that there is a rebirth from that. So tell me about that for a second, because that's powerful.
Yeah. So for me, as you and I have wrapped on a personal level, you know, when we've gotten together with our families and everything, you know, I've talked about a lot of veterans who refer to the day that they were injured as their alive day. And for me, I've always looked at it a little bit deeper. So for me, it's my rebirth, because I truly believe that there are components, not only physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that died on the day that I was injured on the 5th of April of 2003 in Iraq. And I know we'll get into that in a second. But because of that, there are all of these other elements that were born. There were all of these other passions and drives and just meaning to life and depth that started this journey and propelled me into this place of where I am reborn into this person. And I truly believe that every single one of us, every single day, including myself, have an opportunity to be reborn with the choices that we make, with the decisions that we make, with the adversity that we're facing, whether it be COVID-19, whether it be anything else going on in our lives. How we respond to that and how deep we're willing to go will determine what is born from that adversity, from that circumstance. And for me, I'm at a point in my life now, man, and you and I have wrapped up about this on a personal level. When things get hard and things get challenging, I'm like, come on, let's go. Let's do this. All right, I got to roll up my sleeves a little bit. I got to go back to that like military training where I got to get down in the ground and start low crawling a little bit. And I got to get into the trenches. But I'm game with that. I'm so open and ready for that, because I know that's where the real work takes place. That's where the growth takes place. That's where everything happens. And so for me, I don't shy away from it anymore, because I know that I'm planting seeds along the way. If I'm willing to get down and get my hands dirty, and I'll just nourish them throughout the course of my life on this journey, and then hopefully blossom into something beautiful that I'm proud of and my family is proud of in 15, 20, 40, 50 years.
Yeah. And I mean, your voice, and you know this, we've talked about this, your voice, you lead by example. And the thing is, like, when you talk about the rebirth and coming from that alive day, it's a lot of times, obviously unwillingly, right? Like you that wasn't planned. It happened.
Yeah.
Tell me about that day, because I think it's a good jump off for everything in 03.
Yeah. So I joined the Army, the United States Army, September 2002, right out of high school. Well, a couple of months out of high school, and then went off to basic training. My thought process was when I joined the Army, I was going to do 3 years and I was going to get out at 22 years old because I was 19 at the time. This was, of course, after 9/11. We, of course, already had troops in Afghanistan, and there were rumors of us possibly going to war in Iraq. Now, I was aware when I joined the military that war was a possibility, but I was 19. So I knew it was a possibility. I just never thought it would be my reality, which I believe is something that a lot of us fall into that trap, is where we see tragedies happen to people in our communities, in our country, other side of the world. And we pause, if we pause, and we maybe say some, a prayer or send some best wishes or whatever it may be. But then we get back to our day. And we never pause and think, man, that could actually happen to me and somebody I love dearly. And so we all fall into that trap because we're so caught up in our cycles in our lives. And so here I joined the military. I go off to basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia. I'm there for 3 months. I'm an infantryman. And I picked that job because I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be front lines. I graduate basic December of 2002, just to give the listeners a timeline. January of 2003, I was assigned to my unit, which was the 101st out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. March of 2003, I received our orders that we were going to be deploying. It didn't say where, we were just going to be deploying. In March, I'm on a plane. So February, I received my orders. March, I'm on a plane. Wow. And I'm at war, 19 years old. 6 months after I signed the dotted line, I'm in a sandstorm, in the middle of a sandstorm, in the middle of the desert. Like, what the hell is going on? I've never even seen sand like this. Right. And now it's my whole world, and it's going to be my whole world for the next year.
Where was your confidence at that point? Like seeing that, like for me, because I just got the visual of it. It's like we imagine things, I've played soldiers. Like there's like the thing, and then being in the reality of it and seeing it, where you like, because I think at 19, there's a totally different mindset than you and I are now. Were you like, what maybe like, did you question it, or were you like, let's go?
So I didn't understand it from a, and not to get too deep into this, but from a political standpoint, I didn't understand it. I wasn't fully aware of why we're here, what's going on. A lot of service members will tell you, and you can even go back and look at sound bites of me doing interviews in 2003 after I was injured, 2004, 2005. And people would ask me that question, well, do you agree? And was it worth it? And I'm like, listen, that's not my position. My position is to put myself willingly to trust the people that are there to make those decisions. That's what's so incredible about men and women and families that join our military and sacrifice, right?
And I mean, just your mental state as a person, like just you, like, sometimes like, in any sense, you get somewhere and it has nothing to do with if you should be there or not, but just you, like what maybe you imagined when you enlisted, maybe what you imagined. And because your timeline is so quick, you're like training, orders, plane, gone. There. Right. Like all quick.
So I didn't have, and the reason I say all of that is because I didn't have time to process any of it. I didn't have time, because every service member, every veteran will tell you that if you stop and think, you die. If you stop and think, someone else dies because you failed to pay attention to something. So you don't have time to sit here and try to process this information of where you are. You just got to figure out, how do I react? How do I respond? How does the training that I've received in my short time kick in this very instance? And that's all you can focus on. So for me, I'm stuck in the middle of this desert, and I leaned heavily on my squad leaders, my platoon sergeants, my commanders to guide me. And I'll tell you this, and I'll just share this because I think this is incredibly important. Is one of the things I do talk about, when I give keynotes or in any other setting. When we talk about leadership, right? Like a lot of people don't really truly understand how to be a leader. And in the military, I had a sergeant that when he would brief us as far as like scenarios and this is how we respond to this or react to this, I would, as a 19-year-old private, stand up and say, well, Sergeant, like repeat that again. I'm supposed to do what? I'm supposed to react in this way. So mentally, I was still fresh and green of like, wait, if somebody walks in front of our truck in a convoy and is trying to purposely slow us down because they're potentially going to ambush us, you're telling me I still have to drive? You're telling me like that's a human, like what? And I'm still processing that because that's not what I did for 19 years of my life back at home. And I remember that my sergeant would just always get agitated every time I asked a question. Every time I wanted clarification, every time I wanted to understand something, he just like got agitated. And I would say that, and one day as a 19-year-old, which you know this, I'm not supposed to do as a 19-year-old private, speak up. I'm just supposed to respond and react and do. And I said to him, I said, with all due respect, Sergeant, if you don't explain this to me and if I don't understand, guess what? You might die because I make that mistake.
That's real.
And he paused and he was like, all right, let me explain. I was like, I've never been here before, man. I've never left Hope, Arkansas, Shreveport, Louisiana, Dalton, Georgia, where I grew up. Like, I don't know anything else. I've never been to a big city before. The biggest city I've ever been to was Nashville right before I left. And that was to hug my mom and have dinner. That was it. This is the biggest place I've ever been to. Like, what? Come on, man. You got to like understand who you're leading in this moment. And you got to sit down and talk to me. So Theo, I had no time to process anything. But with that said, I never thought of dying. I never was afraid of getting shot. I didn't have that fear. I really didn't. I don't know why. But I'm going to tell you the thing that scared me, that shook me to my core, was the landmine. Landmines just shook me, man. And the reason is because you can't see them, right? They're camouflaged. And
you can't prepare. You
can't prepare for them. What do you do?
Yeah.
And I worried about that so much. That was always a constant in my mind for those first few weeks of being in Iraq. And fast forward to the 5th of April, 2003, I'm driving a truck through a city called Karbala, and the front left tire of the Humvee that I was driving runs over a roadside bomb, a landmine. Boom. It's crazy. And the reason I say that in that tone, and I have a little bit of a pause, is because I want the listener to think about the thing that I was terrified and was afraid of. I gave it so much power and so much control, and it was the thing that got me. And here I am now in this Humvee, 3 other guys in the Humvee with me. They're all thrown out of the vehicle. They're all physically, they're fine. But I later learned mentally and emotionally they were not fine. That day messed with them. That day sat with them. And the reason being is because they can hear me, who was still trapped inside of the truck, screaming and yelling at the top of my lungs. And there was nothing they can actually do, at least for immediately. They had to wait 5 minutes to come and pull me out of the Humvee.
So you were on fire for 5 minutes.
I was on fire for 5 minutes inside of this Humvee that was engulfed in flames, because what happened was the landmine exploded. It detonated everything we had inside of the Humvee. So which consisted of fuel. So extra fuel in case we broke down, which consisted of our ammo. So we had actually like rockets and 50 cal rounds that were in the back seat right behind me. So suddenly all of this stuff was triggered and detonated, and it's shooting off like a 4th of July show. Like all this stuff is heating up and shooting off, which is why they couldn't come immediately and just pull me out, because, they get too close and one of those bullets or something hits them. Now the unit has to worry about getting 2 guys or 3 guys or 5 guys. And
you were trapped because of the way the vehicle had hit, or you were trapped because of the seatbelt in the door? Like, what was trapping you?
So what's crazy is like, I was, for some reason, man, I was always the one that wore a seatbelt.
Wow.
And a lot of the guys would say like, man, I'm not wearing a seatbelt. And they were like, why do you put on a seatbelt? I'm like, I don't know. It's just what I did. I just put on my seatbelt. So I had a seatbelt on that day. And the way that the Humvee was pinned, it like obviously from the explosion, now I was trapped. I couldn't physically get myself out. And I can give you this visual of where, and even when you look at my body, you can tell that I was sort of laying on one side of my body because there's one part of my body that is burned the most, which is the left side. The left side of my body, the left side of my face is burned the most. And I'm conscious, man. I'm completely conscious and I'm burning alive. And I could tell you now because I've weathered the storm and I'm in a better place in my life and I could go to that place. But I could tell you now that as painful as that was, there was a point where my body just went numb. But it was so liberating in a sense. Where I sort of went to this other place and my mind, I thought of my mom. I thought of, things I wanted to do in my life. And it was just quiet and peaceful. There was no external noise. It was just me and my thoughts in my head. And I remember that my eyes would get to the point of closure. They would start to close. And it just felt good to let go, man. But I understood that if I kept them closed for too long, that's it. I'm dead. I'm dead because there's no fight. And I would tell myself, for no other reason but besides the fact that that was all I had, I would tell myself, open your eyes. Somebody's going to come. And I would open my eyes and I would continue that cycle of like screaming and yelling at the top of my lungs for someone to come and pull me out. And 5 minutes later, they did.
And it's like you lived an entire lifetime in 5 minutes. Like everything that went through.
You and I can stop talking right now and just wait 5 minutes. And most of us can't sit for 5 minutes.
No.
And when I stop and I really think about 5 minutes when your body is going through what it's going through, I don't know how I did it. I don't know how many I've met thousands of burn survivors from the military, from just life. I don't know how. And it just goes to show the power that every single one of us have. The power that the potential we have, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually to get to that place. Like we are built to survive and to thrive. But it's a matter of how long are you willing to sit? Are you down to sit for 5 minutes in complete silence and have your thoughts and work through that?
I saw something the other day. I don't know. I was watching some film on Netflix or something. And this little kid said something and it threw me off. And it just made me think of it. He said something like, we don't drown because we fall in the water. We drown because we stay there. Right. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, man, like you just refused to close your eyes, right? You sat there and you don't know how long you don't know what 5 minutes is. It could have been 2 hours, could have been 30 seconds. You don't know in that moment. And, after it, now you see all these things. They said, what was it? Like 34% of your body or something, right. Was burned. And obviously the long haul that came after this to get to that. But in that moment, what really hits me is you were having these clear thoughts of your mom mm-hmm. and the things you wanted to do. And then you said something earlier in this conversation about even going into the military and joining was we think about things and we see things and we say our prayers and we, donate or we do whatever, but we don't know until we're actually there. Right. And this is, most of people's lives are spectator sports. Most right. people are spectating to things. They have nobody, very few people on this earth can relate to that moment of your life.
Right.
You've talked to a bunch, you just mentioned a bunch of survivors and burn victims and military and all that but they have their own personal part of that. So now after that goes on, you're 19 years old. You're a kid, you're literally a kid. You're 19 years old. That happens. You were in the hospital for an extended period of time, right? Like almost 3 years?
Yeah, almost 3 years. Yeah. Just a couple months shy of 3 years.
So we're sitting here in Mental Health Awareness Month, right? And obviously a big a big part of the stuff that I talk about. It's a lot of stuff that you talk about, you know, because motivation is tied directly into mental health and directly into how your mental is, right? As much as your physical. What's the roller coaster in those 3 years mentally? Because you also had 30 something different surgeries, right?
Yeah. I'm close to that. I think I'm like, I've stopped counting at a certain point because, you know, you compete who's going to have the title in the hospital. All the patients were competing like, all right, how many you got? Oh, I got the, I've already beat you. So you just stop counting because I lost the title to some guys that, you know, 34% of my body, as you stated, was burned. But I met a lot of troops in the hospital that were burned 60%, 70%, 97% of their body. And so that recovery process. So here I am now. I'm in a medical induced coma. I come out of this coma 3 weeks after I'm injured. I'm at Brooke Army Medical Center, which is the burn center for the military in San Antonio, Texas. I wake up. I ask the doctors 2 questions. One, how were the guys that were in the truck with me? Are they all right? He's like, I don't know. The second question was, all right, so when can I get back?
Wow.
Because we were supposed to be there for a year. I only did a month. I got 11 more months to go. I got to go back. And this is when they dropped the bomb on me. He said, unfortunately, due to your injury, you're not going to be able to remain in the Army. You're going to be medically discharged. So the next few days, I also saw my face and my body for the first time and understood the severity. So within a week of coming out of this coma, my identities were taken away from me. Identities meaning physically what I've looked like for 19 years. I now look different. What I thought I was and all the things that I wanted to approach and pursue in my life, gone. The idea of me turning the 3-year idea of being in the Army into a potentially 20-year career, gone. Wearing that uniform, being a man that is, my purpose was to serve. That is what was instilled in me in that short amount of time that I was in that uniform, gone. And I'm going to be thrown out into this world that, as you know, man, can be really challenging. And I'm going to tell you something. That was the first time I fell into a dark hole and I was angry and depressed. I was bitter. And it took my mom one day, her and I having a real deep conversation. And all she said to me was like, just try to believe that something good is going to come from this. Try to be positive. Try to have faith. That was it. And in that moment, I was willing to take that and say, all right, I'll try. I'll try because I ain't got nothing else. I have nothing else. I got to try. And then, so I did that. I applied that. Things became manageable, right? They weren't easy, but they were manageable. And then you fast forward 6 months after, and I'm going through the recovery process, and I visit a patient, another troop who just arrived and was having a hard time acknowledging, you know, his scars and his new norm. And I was asked to go in and talk to him, and I didn't want to do it at first because I didn't know it. I was intimidated. No, like I don't know what to say. But I walked into his room, and after about 45 minutes of him and I just rapping about life, not even about our injuries, just life, I walked out and I noticed that the light above his bed was on, meaning when I walked into the room, it was dark. But when I was exiting, there was light in the room. And I just thought to myself, man, I think I did something good. So what I did is I went and found the head doctor of the burn ward, asked him if I can visit patients between my own appointments. He said, of course. And that became my role. So every evening, late afternoon, going into the evening, I would get something to eat and I would just start walking around to all these rooms. But most importantly, I was like, I'm doing this to help them. I'm doing this to give them something. But you know, because you and I can see each other, I was giving myself something and I didn't know it at that time. I was finding purpose again. I was serving again.
It was service.
Service. I was just learning that now the new uniform were the scars on my body. The new weapon now were my words and my body, the way I maneuvered through different spaces. And I got to tell you, man, that gave me life. It gave me a lifeline, but for only so long, because then there would be something else that would trigger me. whether it was being out in public in San Antonio, somebody taking a glance at me and you know that they're doing a double take and you know that this is odd for them, that triggered something. And now suddenly I'm back in my room crying and screaming and yelling and asking the question, why me? And then I would say to myself, well, I can't stay. The answer's not in this room. It's cool to be connected to that emotion. There's a reason we feel it. You got to be connected to it. But the answer's not in this room. I got to get out of this room. And I would walk out and there would be something that would happen, and so minor. It wasn't even like this big billboard display of an answer. It was so minute. It wasn't. And it would just give me another lifeline, something to carry me for another 6 months. And then in 6 months, guess what? I was back to that place. And that's what I did is I couldn't be overwhelmed with the long term. I had to focus on the short term. I had to focus on the short game and what was going to keep me alive mentally and emotionally every single day. It wasn't even about the physical anymore. I know I was good and I know they were starting to piece me back together. I was now had to focus on my heart and my mind. And even when I got out of the Army at 22 years old, when I was finally discharged, I was done with all the surgeries, the recovery process. I stepped out into the world and I thought to myself, I'm going to be this person. I'm going to be this speaker. And I went out into the world, man, and everybody just put me in a box and said, well, you're better off just speaking to veterans. They didn't get it. But the truth is, Theo, I wasn't ready. I know that now. I really wasn't ready, but I thought I was ready. I wanted to be ready. And so that rejection, all it did was trigger all my mental and emotional wounds that had never healed and closed up. And I'm not even talking about from my injury. I'm now talking to you about things that I experienced prior to joining the Army at 19 years old.
Right. So now everything has kicked off everything in your mind and
triggered everything.
So within the mental state of that, which, most people couldn't wrap their heads around. But what I always say about, mental health and the thing about it is it's unique to every single person. We're all unique in whatever our battle is. So it's whatever could seem silly that someone else is, having a problem with. I always say it's not silly to them. That's real, right? It doesn't make it any different of whatever somebody's dealing with. But what's so funny is you're sitting here saying that it's not even about the physical anymore about this. It's about trauma that was going on before all this, right? Mm-hmm. So this true rebirth that you have, this new uniform, as you just so amazingly said, this finding this new purpose of service, well, that's not that easy. You got to figure out now to get over other things that would have been there regardless.
Because here's the thing. And I've had these conversations, like with my best friend, I've had these conversations. What if I wouldn't have been injured? What potentially would have happened with my life? I don't know. We're all going to speculate, right? I mean, I continue my tour of duty. Like a lot of veteran service members, I do multiple tours. Maybe I get killed in combat. Maybe I don't. Maybe I come home and now the traumas of everything that I've experienced in combat on top of whatever I've experienced prior to joining the military forces me to now do the unthinkable, which we have an issue within our veteran community. Yep. There are veterans, unfortunately, taking their lives every single day. And that is a real issue.
I think it was like 22 a day. I think it's even higher now with all this. And I think that it only goes up.
Yeah. And could I have potentially fallen into that? Right. And so the thing is that
number is staggering, by the way, when you think about it.
When you really think about
it's staggering.
When you think about it, like right now, while you and I are sitting here talking about life,
tonight, 22 veterans are gone.
They're taking their life.
Right.
Because they can feel incredibly isolated. And they don't have the resources to deal with it. And I tell you what saved me, man. I tell you what really allowed me to blossom and to thrive and to becoming this person that I am today. And I'm not even talking about a speaker or somebody that's been on television. Yeah. I'm talking about as a husband, as a father, as a friend, right? Is my best friend one night. I'm 23 years old now. I'm drinking, but all that's doing is escalating everything.
Were you trying to? I was going to ask you that, like, as someone who has been sober just 10 years now. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do anything. I'm like a fucking weirdo. I don't literally do nothing.
Drinking apple cider.
Yeah, I'm drinking apple cider vinegar. I don't do anything, right? But I used to do everything, right?
Right.
Were you hitting it harder after you got out? Were you you are?
Well, part of it is because I couldn't hit it before because I was 19.
Right.
So also too, now being of age and with all of this other, trauma, I'm going and it's giving me this element of like, I'm numb to it all. And I was this, man.
Yeah.
All that would happen at the end of the night of drinking and partying with some friends is I would make somebody else angry.
Same shit.
I would lose friends. I would turn people off.
Yep.
And then I suddenly started realizing my circle, but I was too caught up in my own way to really even pay attention to that.
Yeah. It's that old no one understands. No one understands.
Exactly.
You don't understand. Yeah.
And you know what it took is one night I was in Indianapolis with three other veterans. There was four of us, and we were there for a fundraiser. And we went out and we're just hanging out the night before the fundraiser, and I'm drinking. And one of the veterans who was also injured, but he lost both of his legs. And all of a sudden, like, he's talking to some girl, right? And she's just it's not even about like hooking up or anything. There was she was just chatting with him. But I took it because of my own insecurities. She's not talking to me. She doesn't want to talk to me. Oh, it's because of my scars on my face. Oh, it's because I look like this. So all that did now was trigger. So here we are. We get in the car. We're driving back to the hotel, the four of us. I'm in the very back of this SUV. My best friend is driving the SUV. He's 6'5", 275 pounds. I'm 5'9", 185, 90 pounds. I'm mouthing off. I'm saying something. He says to me from the driver's seat, "Hey, JR, chill out." Nah, you don't tell me to chill out. So I lash out at him. I want to fight him.
Yeah, I've done
He pulls over. He says, "Okay, what do you want to do?" So I'm like, I can't wait to get out of the car. I'm obviously delusional.
Yeah.
By the time I come around to the driver's side, he's back in the car and he's like, "Get in the car." No, get in the car. And I'm just angry, man. I get back in the car. We get to the hotel. The other two guys get out. My best friend Dan says to me, "JR, get back in the car." I sit in the passenger seat and he says to me, "Man, you got to cry." I was like, "What?" He says, "Man, you need to cry. You got to get it out. You got to cry." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Man, physically, you've been put back together, but you got scars and wounds that are open on the inside, and you got to deal with that. And it starts with you crying." And Theo, it's like this dude hypnotized me, man.
Yeah.
I started crying and I didn't even understand why I was crying. And I'm telling you how powerful that moment was, because it wasn't just that moment. We ended up having a really long conversation. But in my willingness to be vulnerable, I found a community. One community member at that time. But I tell you how important that moment was. Every time prior to that interaction, we would end the phone conversation, he would always say, "I love you."
Mm-hmm.
I would always say, "All right, I'll talk to you later." The next day, when we all went to the airport and we had to go our own ways, I'm the first one that looked at him and said, "I love you, man."
Yeah.
Because I finally understood, I'm just going to say it, like, as a man, as a young boy, as a young adult, that you could say "I love you" to another guy. My father left when I was 9 months old. I didn't have any other men in my life. The men that were in my life beat my mother, hit my mother, abused my mother, physically, verbally, emotionally.
And that's that trauma. That's that trauma we talk about that has nothing to do with the injury. It has nothing to do with what went down in 2003. That trauma is trauma that was there regardless. And either this accentuated the speed of it coming out, but now it had to be dealt with in that. And what's funny is you and I have that in common, right? I have that same thing where it's like that trauma of not having someone there, not having that father figure, that makes you, I don't know what, and I go to a lot of psychologists and all that. I'm still trying to figure out what that is of like, you don't want to accept the love, maybe because you don't want to get hurt. Maybe it is like it's like, it's a defense mechanism. It is. And you go, well, if I let this person in, now they're in. But if they stop me, if they kind of walk out, now I'm going to be hurt more. So you know what? I'm just not even going to let them in. Right. And then what that does is you're walking around with shields all day, right? So you have this moment, and now you're starting to see that growth, right, in all ways. And you pinpoint that moment as the moment where things start to change a little, right? It did, because I tell you what, all I was trying to do was penetrate the speaking market, the circuit. I wanted to be a speaker. I was still doing philanthropy work for veterans, but I wanted to be a speaker. That was what I wanted to do. And suddenly it just felt like things started to happen. Pieces started to fall. And I started to gain a little bit of momentum and confidence that things were happening. Because you were okay with yourself. Because I was okay now. With yourself. Yeah, with myself. So like I was recently talking to somebody and I was talking to them about, this process. And I had to learn how to be intimate with myself first and foremost. So important. Like we as men, we think of intimacy and we go back to our 12-year-old ways. We're like, like a soap opera. Yeah. It's like, wait, what do you mean? Get the Fredericks of Hollywood catalog. No. We're talking like with you, and this is what I keep saying to people. Obviously be the example, which you are, and we talked about it earlier. But it's like you have to love yourself. Like you have to I tell everybody, be easy on yourself. Like you got to love yourself, because once you do, and it's like this true like acceptance of you, wrong, right, indifferent, bad, good, things that you've done, things that you're gonna do, whatever. Just accepting who you are. It's going to propel you like a rocket ship to that next level. Yeah. It radiates, man. And people see that. And people, again, like you said, they start to attract to you. And I started a few months after that interaction with he and I got a call from a People reporter. And she's like, we're doing a 5-year piece anniversary on Iraq. I want to include you. I was like, what? So here now suddenly I'm in People magazine with no publicist, with no agent, with no manager. I'm in People magazine and I have like a little 2-page spread of me. Mm-hmm. And then, as you and I have rapped about, a couple of months later, I get an email to audition to become an actor on a soap opera. Which is where I met you. Not that I wasn't on it, but the person I was with at the time was on it. Yeah. And that was in New York, and that's all my children and all that. Yeah. Exactly. And so here I am. I'm like, all right, they want to talk about veterans and the veterans issues. So they cast me. No acting experience. And I go out on there and I, supposed to be on there for 3 months, and it turns into 3 years. But I'm going to tell you something what's really crazy about that I feel like it's important to note. About 2 months after I was injured, I was still in the ICU. The only people that were really allowed in my room was my mother. That was really it. And because of the severity of my burns, the degree of my burns, I had contracted a bug for my wounds being exposed in Iraq, like just something in the air. And because I didn't have that layer of protection, everybody that came into my room had to gown up. I mean, you had to gown up. You had to wash your hands. I mean, the whole 20 seconds before and after. You had to sanitize. I mean, it was extreme. Which is now the norm. Every night. It's crazy. Which is now the norm. which is nuts, because they're telling me, or they're telling all of us, hey, gown up when you go to the store. Wash your hands. Wash your hands. You knew sanitize.
I'm like, I'm good. I got this. Like, I got this, babe. We're good. Let me teach you how to wash your hands properly, like how they do in the hospital. We good, babe. We got this. We all right.
So your mom would come. And again, you're still a young kid. You're 21, 22 years old.
I'm 19 still.
This is right when you got in.
This is right after I got hurt. So here I am 2 months after I got hurt. This is now May, right? Like May. It was May. So it was a month after. Because June is when I started to get ready to get discharged, and I was on the step down ward, what they refer to. But what's crazy about this is every evening, our routine, our what we did when there was the doctors and nurses were really coming into our room before visiting hours were over and she left, we'd watch novelas. That was our thing. And you know what novelas are. Spanish soap operas, man.
I know all about them.
And
so dramatic.
You don't even have to speak Spanish.
No, the camera comes punching in real quick. Give a crazy face. I love
music. Like
drama is heavy. They take soap operas to another level.
Yeah. And I remember one night saying to my mom, one day I'm going to be on a soap opera.
Wow.
And she said, oh, really? And I said, yeah. And she said, so what's the storyline going to be? I was like, I don't know. I haven't thought about it that deeply, but I know I'm going to have a beautiful girlfriend. And we laughed about it because I'm always clowning. 5 years later, almost to the date, I get the email to audition to become an actor on that show.
And you've never acted?
I've never acted. Come on, man.
Why? And were you comfortable? Were you comfortable, like, to put that in front of people? Were you comfortable in front of cameras because you had been doing public speaking and stuff? Were you comfortable talking to more? Because some people get all weird, like. I even know actors who are amazing actors who are shy, right? Like it's crazy. Right. And then I know, people who can't act wet in the pool who are actually quite, gregarious and out there. But what's funny is like, you were comfortable at this point, right? When you went to audition for that.
I was good. I was not fazed by one bit. And I think a lot of the reason why is not only because I was doing some speaking, so I was comfortable in front of people, but the camera component, what helped me was I was doing a lot of work on behalf of veterans, working with a couple of different nonprofits, raising awareness. So what that required is me going and doing an interview on whatever network that gave us some time. And I was accustomed to being in the green room before I went out on the show. And everybody from the nonprofit, whether it was the executive director or the PR or the marketing, just spilling all this information. Don't forget to plug the website. Don't forget to plug this. Don't forget to say this. Don't forget to say that. And I would retain all of it. And I understood how to bridge and deliver the information that needed to be delivered. So suddenly now I'm in front of a camera on all my children and I'm not even fazed. They're like, hey, we got to change to the script. No big deal. I'm used to adapting.
I give so much credit. I don't think people understand. 30 pages a day or 20 pages a day dialogue. And
then you can have this whole monologue and all of a sudden the hour before they're like, hey, we're going to cut this and bridge this and like bleed this into that. And I tell you, it was tough. But for me, the challenge was now from a mental standpoint, being comfortable on camera with my scars and everything. I wasn't fazed. And luckily the reason why is because I understood the magnitude. I understood the power of me putting myself in front of the camera. I wasn't only representing myself. I was representing my communities. So that's why I showed up and I learned, man, I'll leave a name out of this, but there was one instance where I did a scene with someone who was well polished and everything.
Right. And
I remember this person was like, what are you doing? That's not like what, and like
trying to tell you how to act and stuff.
Right. And I felt, and I was like, and I took it so personal because I was like, well, I didn't decide to launch this storyline. I didn't decide to pick up somebody off the street. Right. Like I didn't ask for this. Like
that person's a fool.
Needless to say, what I did though, is I took it and I was like, all right, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
So I would stay on set because I lived right across the street from the studio. So even when I wasn't working, I would still show up at the studio and go up to the set and I would just watch Theo when he was up there, right? Watch whoever else was out there. I would just watch you because you're trained.
Yeah.
And I started trying those little things, just little body language, little mannerisms, little pauses, little whatever. It turned into 3 years of me being on that show, man.
So in that time, you also now moving to New York, right? Which is a whole different world, right? So a couple of questions, because that trips me out, because I was in LA, but I was going back and forth to New York, right? And I was obviously born and raised in New York. There's tons and tons of people there. So there's two things that are happening to you, which is crazy to me. One, you're seeing more people than you've ever seen in your life, which means more people are seeing you than have ever seen you in your life. So you're kind of now dealing with that whole thing that you and I have talked about multiple times, how people react, people looking at you, people this, right? And you're not at the point you are now, which is most people know you from Dancing with the Stars or the soap opera or the public speaking or everything else. But at that point, you're kind of fresh out, right? You're going into the soap opera, and you're meeting more people per day, whether you physically meet them or not, just in your space, than ever. And then at the same time, I want to get into, after that, you seeing yourself on camera for the first time, because that's a trip when you see yourself on TV for the first time. Even if you're doing public speaking and stuff, this is different, right?
Right.
You know, what you were seeing. So what was it like going to New York? You know, like we've talked about, with your scars, with who you are now, with this rebirth coming out, and then seeing yourself on camera.
Well, the good thing is New York has a 6 months winter, so you could bubble up.
It's true.
You can hoodie up.
Yeah.
You can cover yourself up.
Yeah, you're covered up.
But in all seriousness, by this point, I had gotten to the point where I accepted myself.
Yeah.
I had gotten to the point where I was like, hey, I can't keep focusing on trying to be that person that I was, what I looked like before.
Because you used to get angry.
Because I used to get angry.
Yeah.
And I understood that there is power in the scars. There's power in me walking around without even actually formally meeting somebody, but just smiling at them and just keeping it moving, jumping on the one train. Like, there's power in that. That person is going to remember, I saw this guy that, oh my God, this is what he looked like. But he's smiling, he was laughing, he was clowning.
Well, you said you and I both have similar quotes. You said scars are like tattoos that tell a story, right?
That scars are like tattoos, but with better stories.
Yeah, with better stories. And I've always said that scars, mean you've been through something, like you've handled stuff.
Right.
I said it back
like
in
street
the day.
Cred.
Yeah, but like that you've overcome, right? Whatever that is, whatever that scar is. Both physically, and then there's always a mental scar under the physical scar. Right. So it's like you got it double, right? You don't just have the knife wound or the whatever, this. You have then the instance of that, which builds you up mentally.
Right.
So that's you in New York, and now you're doing that, and they air pretty quick. Like once you start shooting, right, with soap operas. I've never done one, but I know that they air quick. Like you shoot
like
it in
3 weeks or a month, and then suddenly what you shot 3 weeks ago is now on camera. And to your question related to how was it for me to see myself on camera, that was tough.
Wow.
And it was tough because, one, you're always your biggest critic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, oh my God, I'm horrible. Oh my God, I should have done that differently. Yeah. But it was also tough because now my scars are enhanced. Like my mirror at home does not compare to this camera that is shot in whatever pixels it is and quality, and the resolution is now.
We don't analyze the mirror. We don't analyze the mirror the way we analyze on TV. Or
you're right. Yeah.
It's almost like when people back in the day, you'd hear your voice on a answer machine. You'd be like, that's how I sound, right? But you don't realize that that's what you sound like every day because you don't listen to yourself.
You don't listen to yourself.
Just like you don't analyze a mirror. And that is, unfortunately, as an actor or anyone on camera, the first thing you do is judge yourself physically. Then you start to judge yourself performance-wise. And most of the stuff you're judging, no one else is seeing. It's just that's, again, a lot of actors. And I always thought it was stupid, but I do realize it now because I've become like this. A lot of actors have a hard time watching themselves for multiple reasons because there's nothing you could do about it. It's done, right? You can't change it. And then the other thing is, but for me, I think as I got more comfortable with myself, I found it as a tool to improve. So I watch it to go, okay, maybe I shouldn't stand like that. That looks ridiculous. Like, or maybe, it's kind of, it's helped me as in more of, I've looked at it as a study. So when you first were seeing that, you're looking at it and you're seeing all the bad, right? You're seeing all the stuff.
I'm like, why does my lips sag like this? Well, it's because of my scars. Why do I, oh my God, that scar on, everything is propelled to a whole nother place. And I just had to start. So one of the biggest things, one of the actors told me on the show, they said, don't go onto the blogs, don't go onto the forums, stay away from the message boards. And of course I was like, why? So I go one night and I'm looking, and mind you, there was people on there that were like, oh my God, we love him. He's incredible. And, we love his story and love what he's about. And there were some people that were like, oh my God, his scars. Right now, that got to me because they told me not to, and they knew why, but it got to me. But then I would just remind myself, I'm here for a reason. There's a reason I'm here.
Yeah. And also we understand, listen, I'm the dude that I read all the comments. I read all that shit because for me, I'll be the first to say a lot of people don't want to hear this because a lot of people are like, don't read it. It messes you up and this and that. And I always say like, I learned stuff from some of the things I read. I'm like, oh, but I also am very aware. I wrote something today that said, don't let your beliefs put you in a box of that they box you up, like basically like, and what I mean by that is like everybody's got their own shit. Like you got to keep an open mind. If somebody feels some way about something you do or the way you look or the way that's them. I can't do anything about that. Right. I can't control the world. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that I'm going to stay away from it. It's why I read the bad reviews on Amazon before I read the good ones. I want to know, I like to see other people's opinion. Now, whether they be basement dwellers or people who don't do anything in their life and just write comments, fine. But again, I think that if you're okay with yourself, you're Teflon. Nothing can touch you. Right. So, and you got to that point in your life where you're like, you're untouchable. And no comment, no matter what someone says, is going to do things because what you've been through is 20 billion times more than that person who wrote that comment, most likely. Right? Yeah. So if you look at it from the 10,000 foot view and you go, who cares? Right. That's why none of that shit bothers me anymore. I can't control the world. Right. So do you have all those people telling you, but that's because unfortunately, most actors are, they're like one bad comment away from losing it, because, they're emotional messes because they don't. But that's because a lot of them feel like and I know this from doing this 20 years, is that they feel like they're living a lie. They're like, somebody let me in the game and I'm not even sure if I should be here because they don't have that self-confidence. Yeah, they
need validation. They're seeking that validation and approval. And if you're not getting that, it's tapping into that pre-existing wound that is prevalent, that is there. And you're right, because I tell people, it's like, what helped me deal with that was prior to even being on camera, I had to walk through the world, whatever spaces, and I had to deal with people doing double takes. Yep. And I had to, so the great thing about the scars on the exterior versus a lot of my friends, and you have a lot of your friends, and we've talked about this, a lot of my friends that have them on the inside that nobody sees them. The beauty about having them on the exterior that I see now as a blessing is that it allows people to understand, as you say, I've been through something. There's meaning there. And we can get it out of the way. And then we can just focus on everything else that wherever we're at, we can focus on that now and rap about that. And that's the great thing about it. And so reading that stuff, it was like, oh, okay. All right, cool. It just challenged me. It's cool. All right, cool. And I know there's people that feel that way, but I'm not going to be fazed by that.
And again, if you really look at it in the whole comment sense of the world, like, and that's what we're in right now with social media and like all this stuff. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you don't have to be in the spotlight to deal with comments, Facebook, your friends, your family, whatever somebody says. Yeah. It's irrelevant because if it is something bad, who knows? Did they have a bad day? Are they really your friend? Who cares? Right? Like at the end of the day, who cares? If you know who you are, this all keeps coming back to, especially during Mental Health Awareness Month. It's like, do you know who you are? Who are you? And then more people are worried about if they wear a certain watch, if they wear a certain shirt, if they do something, it's for other people. It's not for them. Once you start doing it for you and you're cool, like your man in the car letting you cry and bringing you closer to who you are, you understanding that word love and where that brings you, you wanting to serve other people, you then going to the soap opera. It's almost like, that road was paved for you after everything, because it was all playing into the one original thing, how this started, which was service to yourself and to others. Right. So now you are a living example for people. Not just because of your injuries, because you found who you are.
Right.
And it doesn't mean, by the way, that we're not constantly doing self-inventory. We're not constantly doing self-work. It just means that we're saying it's okay to get to know yourself. That's not a selfish thing. It's okay to be intimate with yourself.
Exactly. It's okay to take a step back and not always trying to serve somebody else. And say, hey, I need to be served. I need to be fed. I need to be fueled. It's okay to take that pause and do you. And I think that's the, with May being Mental Health Awareness Month, and then also COVID-19, we have nothing but time. And I know that can also equally be dangerous.
That's right.
But it also is a challenge to those to say, hey, now's the time for us to do that work. So when we go back to whatever that normal is going to be, when we come out on the other side of this, you're good. You're ready. You're prepared for the opportunities that present themselves. But if you don't do that work during this period right now, don't expect to try to get it done when we get back to moving and hustling and grinding and just going.
Yeah, everybody has that ability, if they want to have a rebirth of types.
Right.
During all this. Do you know what I mean? You have that ability to kind of sit with yourself, because I think more people, especially, I know you and I move around a lot. We're always on the go, on planes, on this, on that, things going on, that a lot of times you don't get those moments, not just with yourself, but maybe sitting with the kids, it's talking with your wife, talking with your spouse, doing that moment where you go, man, I didn't realize, like, you're seeing what's important. I know a lot of people are talking about that. But also really saying, like, what do I want? Right. I've recently said, like, how can you ever get what you want if you don't know what you want?
Right.
You have to know, like, truly, what do you want? It doesn't mean it's not going to change.
Right.
What do you want? Right. And so you're sitting here, your journey, you're figuring out, because even though it's acting, you're serving people, because you're being the example, you're showing them something different. You're being your positive self and your confident self, and you're doing this. Now you're doing that for 3 years. How many years later did you do Dancing with the Stars?
3 years later.
3 years later.
Yeah, 3 years later.
And tell me about your mom and all that, how that launches in, because that's amazing.
So needless to say, like, so I you do all these like soap opera gatherings, the fans and meet and greets and all that. Yeah, the meet and greets. And I remember on a couple of occasions, the fans said, oh, you should be on Dancing with the Stars. You would be great. Would you ever do it? And to be quite honest with you, I never really watched the show up to that point. I mean, I'd kind of catch an episode here and there, but nothing really, consistent. And I was like, I guess, yeah. Just kind of put it off. And then All My Children announces, now we're talking about 2011. It's April of 2011. All My Children announces they're going to cancel later that year. Wow. So I'm getting all these texts, from friends and people like, oh my God, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And one of my friends says, hey, whatever happened to that Dance with the Stars thing? And I was like, why does everybody keep bringing this up? So what I did is I went and I talked to the executive producer of All My Children. And I just said, hey, I just want to pick your brain, because she had become like a friend. I was like, I just want to pick your brain. Everyone keeps suggesting this thing. What do you think? And she's like, oh my God, you'd be amazing on that show. She's like, I know the casting director over there, because All My Children had a few people that have been on Dancing, ABC. So she's like,
dancer? Were you a dancer?
So I was never a formal dancer. I was a dancer by default, because my mom didn't have any other dance partners when I was a kid. So walking through the living room, she's playing music on the weekend, and she grabs me and she starts dancing with me. And I'm like, yeah, stop. It's embarrassing. And then when I became a teenager, I realized girls like guys that could dance. So then I was like, Mom, teach me how to dance. Right. So then she taught me a little bit. And then I just started naturally just like kind of out dancing my mom. So we'd go out to like little concerts, like Hispanic artists, right? And we started dancing, my mom and I, and she was like, "What are you doing? I didn't teach you that. Like, where'd you learn how to do that?" And it was just my own natural rhythm and ability. So they put in the call. I go meet. They called me. They waited it out. Actually, they drug this out. So because they had pressure from the network that they wanted bigger names. Mm-hmm. So they were drawing this out for a little bit, seeing if they can get somebody else to fill, my slot. And then in August, they called me and they said, we want you on the show. Will you accept? And I said, yeah, of course. So I accepted. So here's the irony of it all, is that in September, it was still August, end of August. We shot our last show for All My Children. And the next day, I was part of the cast announcements of season 13 of Dancing with the Stars. Mm-hmm. So it just like rolled over right into the next thing. And then, of course, I go on that show and everybody, I didn't know this at the time, but apparently you could do like Vegas wagers. Like you could do bets on who you thought would win.
You could bet on anything.
Yeah, I know. I realized
bet on anything. Yeah, anything.
So they tell me this later, because if I would have known, I would have bet on myself. But they tell me later that they projected that I was going to go home week 3, week 4. That was what the bet was.
Wow.
I was like, that's cool.
They didn't know.
They didn't know. So I get paired up with Karina, man, and we go out and we win the competition. And for me at that point, that show allowed me to tap into who I've always been. I've always been this big energy.
The viewership was through
Oh my God, 20 million people every single week. Every single week, 20 million people. And then even if you didn't watch the show, you sort of knew about it because people were posting on social media. There were magazines that were covering it.
It changed everything, like just in your existence, right?
Man, 3 years on a soap opera, and I could still walk, in LA through Ralph's, and nobody would even pay attention to me.
Right. Yeah.
3 months on Dancing with the Stars, I couldn't even stand in the middle of Soho, in New York City with my wife.
It's crazy. It's
crazy. It changed everything. And it wasn't just from a U.S. standpoint. It was now global. It was international. And I had no idea, because for 3 months, I was just in a room with 2 producers and my dance partner, Karina, and we were just dancing. And then all of a sudden, the show ends at 3 months, and now I'm in the world. And now I'm realizing, oh, these are all the people that have been on the other side of that camera. Mm. And
were you public speaking at that point?
I was already. So when I joined On My Children, speaking started to happen. So those 3 years that I was on My Children, I was starting to do speaking. But of course, dancing just propelled me and introduced me to a whole other audience that didn't know me.
That's what I was going to say. So it propelled everything else, right? Everything. Like the public speaking got bigger.
But also on a bad level as well. Well, now I got all this newfound fame, right? I'm making different money now. Mm-hmm. There's more pressure related to, I have to go do this and I have to fulfill this commitment.
How did that fuck with you mentally?
What happened was I felt like slowly I was sort of now not doing it for the love of wanting to serve and give to people. I was now doing it because I had to do it. I had to capitalize.
Did you find the fame thing intoxicating?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, it got in the way of my relationship with my now wife. Like back then,
you guys were together. You were dating.
We were together. We were dating, and it just, I was gone a lot. Like, I mean, I was gone those first couple of years after that show, man. Out of 365, I was on the road at least 250, and I was gone. I was never home, and I was just not equipped and prepared. I was on the road by myself. Sometimes my assistant would travel with me. But it was lonely. It was lonely. Yeah. I was writing the book, but it weighed on me, man. It really weighed on me. And then I started realizing there were another element of scars that I had never dealt with, right? There were other things that were now like propelled. And now that I had to take a step back and look at myself and realize, like, yo, what am I doing? Because I thought I'd healed, but I hadn't completely.
Isn't it funny how, it's really interesting, and I kind of been trying to dive a little deeper into this with myself, is sometimes the things we imagine the way things are going to be, right? Like things we want, We say in our head, man, I want to do this kind of movie, or man, I want to be on this kind of TV show, or it has nothing to do. That's just my journey. But like, I want a job like this, or I want to meet someone like this. And what we build up in our head, right? We want this. And then somehow, even when getting it or whatever, it brings out a whole host of other things that we didn't think about, negative things that we were like, oh, where did those come from? I didn't think about that. And I've always found that really interesting, because I don't think anything in life that's great doesn't come with some type of problem per se. You know what I mean? Like some type of negative thing that you have to deal with. And I'm talking like the greatest things in the world. Like I can use the first thing that comes to my head is like, my kids are the greatest thing in the world. Like my two sons are 2 and 4. I love them to death. But God, they're a lot of work, right? like it's like, I love them so much. My God, they're a lot of work, right? And like, they are relentless. They're nonstop. They're like hyenas on crystal meth. Like they are nonstop. And I'm like,
I never forget hanging out when and we're playing. What is that game? Pickleball.
Pickleball, yeah.
And you and I are just talking about life and living close to each other and making that transition.
Austin.
And I just remember you would get one line out and then your head would swivel. Okay, I got one right here. Yeah. Where's the other one? And then you'd be like, Jared, hold that thought, Jared. I'll be back.
They are like, I've never seen something like, and I love them. Their hair's down to their shoulders. It's like Lord of the Flies. They're like jumping. They could jump in the fire. They could be anyway. They move so fast too. It's like they're like White Walkers or something. Like they move so fast. And I'm like, what is happening here? And so whenever I go out in public, which I don't like, or a gathering or like with friends or hang out, it's like me and my wife just look at each other and it's like, what do we do here? Because they are crazy. They're just, and again, I love them for that, because they love life so much that they just want to go. But again, why I bring that up is that that's the greatest thing in my life, those two. But again, it's also exhausting. And then I sit there with friends who don't have kids, who it hasn't happened for them. They're older or they're whatever. And I look at their life and I'm like, man, look at this life. This person's got this, they got this freedom, they got this. And then you talk to them and they're like, man, I just really want to meet someone and have kids. And I'm like, oh, this is crazy. So anything that we want in life, and here you are, you're traveling around, you got 20 million people that just watch you, the public speakings, whatever, but there is a loneliness that comes with going, you're in the hotel, you're doing this, you're with yourself more.
Yeah. And the pressure of, you got to show up, not only you got to speak, but then you got to do a meet and greet. And I know people probably listening like, yeah, but you're making a great living for yourself. But that doesn't even matter. You're not even focusing on that. In that moment, you're not even focused on that. I'm just sitting here like, that's the least of my worries. Like I'm sitting here like, man, I wish my wife can be with me. Yeah. I wish we could travel together. I wish that, I wish these were spaced out a little bit more. I wish I had a little bit more me time. I wish I could work out.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't have to eat all of this.
And it's even like, the buffet at the hotel or this, but it's even like little things. Like you said, it's not that. What people don't understand is I do a lot of Comic-Cons, meet and greets, or I used to, pre-COVID and all that. But it's like, sometimes it's like, I want to talk to the people longer. I'm like, oh, but they're moving them. You can't talk to them longer. And it's like, you always feel this weird sense of like, man, I wish I could do more for this person or for that moment. And it's like, there's always this sense. And again, it all goes back to you being okay with what it is and what the situation is. Like I always say, if you're leading with a good heart and you're leading with a good head and you're leading with good intentions, it's all good. Right. Like, so sometimes do I want to, not talk to all these people or not do this? Sure. Sometimes I want to talk to a ton of people and I want to rap and everybody gives in there and everybody's talking about everything. But again, probably one of the reasons why I did this podcast and you and I, and this is why I'm excited for yours. And what a lot of people don't understand is as my life got bigger, my world got smaller, meaning that I started hibernating more, meaning that I started being reclusive more. I don't, and it's not for any other reason than I had a hard time through major trial and error trusting people. Meaning like, what does this person want from me? Or what is the real reason for this? And what would happen is I found myself not having as many thoughtful conversations. They were either business related, or it was me with my family, which is amazing, or me with my really close friends since childhood, or occasionally when you and I would hang, or some people around the neighborhood who have families and we have a similarity and we're simpatico on things. But it was getting less and less of having like true, honest, long form conversations.
Yeah. Feeding the soul.
100%. And I think that's why things like this are important. I think that's why people are attracted to them, is because we get to hear other people speak and it almost feels like we're in on it. Like we're there and we're like, oh, that's right. Oh man. Like I had a friend just call me and he's like, oh, I was listening to your podcast and I was writing notes and I was doing this, because they feel like they're in the conversation. And as we come into a more social media texting world, kind of quiet world, we don't really have these upfront conversations with people anymore. And we're always thinking about like right now, you and I can't look at our phones. You and I can't get distracted by something because we're talking to each other. And if you really assess your life, who's ever listening to this, when do you really do that? When do you ever really just sit with someone, push everything to the side and go, what's going on? Let's go deep for a second. Let's talk without looking at time, without looking at clocks. Like let's have an honest conversation. We don't do that with our own spouses. We don't do that with our own kids. We don't do that with our own family. And for me, I started to realize that the person I wanted to be, I need other people to be who I want to be. For where I'm trying to get to on my journey here, I need so many people. And that doesn't mean that I rely on myself, but I need to feed my soul with other people.
Yeah. I had a guy say to me when I was, I think I was like 23 years old. He said, you know what a problem is? The problem is with you, JR. And, I was like, well, what's the problem? And he said, and he used this analogy and he said, if you have a whole pizza at the table, you'll let everybody else take a slice and you won't eat at all. And I was like, okay, well, at 22, 23 years old, I'm like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Like, what does that mean? And he's like, you're so giving that you'll give so much of yourself, but who's feeding you? What's feeding you?
Yeah.
And that never made any sense to me until fast forward, 5 years ago, and I realize now, like, because I've through different stages of life, because guess what? I had to go to therapy again after this whole dancing wave. And after I had to go to therapy again, man. I had to like learn some things about myself. Yeah. And now I understand, what you're talking about. My wife, first and foremost, my daughter, my best friend, my family, like
hanging with my dog,
hanging out with my dogs. Yeah. Like Romeo is my guy. And we've talked on that level about our dogs and what they mean to us. And he's been there through all the stages,
everything.
And it still shows up every single day to say, what's up, man? Let's shake, let's run, let's hang out. And
no judgment
and understanding. Oh, now I get the pizza thing now. They're bringing slices to the table and feeding my soul. So I'm in a better place now because guess what? When I get done with the speaking engagement and I'm off of a stage and doing a meet and greet, similar to you, what I can't wait for is to get home to my girls. Mm-hmm. Like, I love that moment of being in front of an audience. I love that. But I equally cannot wait till I get home to my girls and to where I feel safe and I can be told by my wife, hey, we need to do this. We got to do this. We need this done around the house. Hey, can you drop her off? I love that. I'm like, I'm game. I'm in because I feel human.
Yeah.
I feel real. I don't feel like what's needed of me is what's my responsibility. Yeah. Right. Like as a family man. Not like when I'm at these events, it's like all kind of superficial stuff to a degree, But it's all a journey.
It's the most real life thing. And I think that, the one thing that I've been chasing, I think I'll continue to chase. I'll probably be saying it as one of the last words, before I go wherever that is balance, right? Like I'm always chasing balance, right? Because I want to do so many things. I want to accomplish so many things. I want to I want to be the best example as I can as a human on this planet, not just to myself, but to other people, and more importantly, to my former self. You know, we were saying on a recent podcast that it was like, you know, when you're on a plane and the plane's going down, what do they say? Like, take your oxygen mask first, put it on, and then you can help everybody else. So I'm like, I'm constantly working on myself. And as much as I'm doing it for me, I'm doing it because I want to help others by being the best version of myself. And I'm trying to figure out what being the best version of myself is. You know, I'm things like this, you know, what I do with acting, what I do with my family, what I do with just anything in life. So for me, you and I have that in common, where it's just like we're constantly on this journey, which can be frustrating because we just are so like, okay, how can I better everything right now? How can I better myself, my life, my other people around me? Like, I have such I feel my purpose of every day is to like get up and attack like life. That's what I want to do. So for you, I think one of the things that I would love to end off with, like, you know, your purpose. Do you know like what's the mission today? Like what is it for JR? Like, with all the stuff that you're doing, what is that purpose for you?
My purpose is to spread unconditional love to everybody I come in contact with. And what I mean by that is love without conditions, love without, well, I'll love you if you do this or if you fulfill that, or I just want to love. I just want to love. I don't want to worry about anything else. I just want to love. I want to give love. And I know that if I give that sort of love, I know it comes back. And I'm so passionate about trying to impact people. Like, I have the same thought process as you. I try to attack every single day. Now, I'm human, and there are certain days I could tell you I'm frustrated and pissed off, and I'm like mad that why isn't this working? Why isn't that working? I mean, me kicking off my podcast, and we were rapping about that a little bit, but I get frustrated because I'm like, all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to impact people. I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to share resources and tools with people so they don't have to have a near-death experience to hopefully learn these things. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm trying to do. Mm-hmm. And what's frustrating is, like, the world that we're in, people will probably sometimes pay more attention to the quote unquote influencer, right? Mm-hmm. To the person doing a TikTok video. Yeah. Why is it on my Instagram, my family and I, for fun, do a TikTok video, and there's more weight to that than maybe me sitting down recording a video talking about life and this feeling that I had. And
they'll get there. They'll get there.
And that's the thing, is I got to learn, is I got to be patient too, and just say, I just got to put out what I believe is real to me. That love, it comes back. It eventually comes back, right? And people will find you when they need to find you. You just have to be there. That's right. So for me, I just, you know, and the reason why I say, people are probably like, why is he saying like this love, unconditional love? And the reason why that fuels me, I love my mother to death. My mother was my hero. My mother did so much for me. But I also can tell you that my mother has dealt with a lot of trauma in her life. But she never dealt with the trauma in her life. Mm. And because of that, it's unfortunately caused us to get to this place where our relationship isn't maybe what it used to be, or where I would want it to be. Because I've had to learn, oh, wait, my mom loved me as long as I didn't move away. My mom loved me as long as I followed whatever model that she had perceived for me. And it all stemmed from this element of not wanting to be abandoned, because she had had so much abandonment in her life. And I had to learn through therapy how to set up boundaries. And Theo, I think you probably feel the same way, but in my culture, my heritage, you don't set up boundaries with your family, especially your mother. Mm-hmm. And for me to have to get to that point of saying, this isn't healthy when you go down this road just because you're afraid and because you haven't dealt, I have to step back a little bit. Mm-hmm. That's the hardest thing. And so I learned later in life is that she loves me, but there is also a component where I know she loved me as long as I followed certain things and I didn't leave her. And all I want to do is just give love, because that's what it just should be, with no conditions.
And what's funny is, and it just shows how when you look back at moments in your life, if you wind up getting in that fist fight with your man and he doesn't tell you to sit in the car and cry, if you come to blows instead of conversation, you might never get to that moment where he says, hey man, I love you, let it go, let it out. And then instead it would have been a shit show of just you two fighting and all this other stuff, right? But instead, in that moment, you find love for yourself, love for others and all that. And now since then, you've been on this journey to kind of spread that all throughout. And I'm telling you, man, I've said this from day one. We are entering into this age of authenticity, this age of realness, and love, and not in a corny whatever way of just like being real, because I believe being real is love. And I love you, brother, and I think that you are one of the realest, and I appreciate you, and I'm so glad we got to do this. And now I'm ready to do Rebirth. So,
yo, man, you got to come and do Rebirth.
Let's go.
And I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your guidance. I appreciate everything that you share with me, man. And I'm grateful that you have theory, and that
Thank
you
you,
give
brother.
me a chance to share what my little theory is about life. And yeah, man, when we get out of this, we got to like link up. I can help you chase the boys. I can help you chase the boys.
Bring your running shoes. Put tennis rackets on the bottom of them.
I'll stretch and everything, baby.
All right, brother. All right, I'll see you soon.
All right, my man.
All right.
Much love.
That's the show. I told you. I mean, he is just, that's the real deal right there. In every single way. I could talk to him forever. I got so many questions. And again, I'm so honored to have him in my life. And I'm really glad that you all got to hear it from him as well. So we're doing this. We're going to continue to do this. And I'm going to say that for a long time. So you know the deal. #TheoryPod. Subscribe, rate, review, tell your friends, tell your cousins, tell your spouses, tell your sisters and brothers, tell your dogs, tell everybody. Theory. We're going. We're here. And we ain't going nowhere. Be the example. Be easy on yourself. Be easy on everyone else. And remember, we're okay. We are okay. And keep moving forward. Keep moving forward.